Welcome to MasterMind Minutes, the leading podcast for franchisors, franchisees, and entrepreneurs of all types. We have one guest, we ask one question, and we get one expert answer, and we do it in minutes, not hours. Hello again, good morning, and welcome to another edition of MasterMind Minutes. My name's Gary Occhigrosso. I am the founder and managing partner of Franchise Growth Solutions, the premier franchise advisory, franchise sales and development organization in North America, as we'd like to think. I'm also the publisher of the Franchise Growth Solution National Newsletter. And for those of you who are new to the MasterMind Minutes experience, it's actually pretty simple. We have one guest. We typically ask one question or have one topic, and we get an answer. And we get that answer. We do it in minutes, not hours. Guaranteed you can do this 15 minutes while you're on the treadmill. Now, we realize that that may not always be an appropriate amount of time to cover the topic. So at the end of the program, we'll ask our guests to, share how we can best get in touch with them, or if you want to know more about the company, website, whatever, we'll do that at the end of the program. And today, my guest is Gregory Mohr, and he is the CEO and founder of Franchise Maven. More importantly, he's a visionary entrepreneur and a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. And really the driving force behind Franchise Maven. His journey was started from he became a seasoned microelectric circuit engineer. I want to know what that is, by the way, also. And then really became the CEO of Franchise Maven and developed it into a franchise empire, so to speak. And as the CEO, he's really the guiding force behind hundreds of individuals and business owners, helping them navigate the complex world of franchising. And, that's what we talk about here, franchising. But he doesn't just sell franchises, all right? He partners with the individuals really on a transformative journey. His commitment to understanding the unique needs and goals of each candidate is what sets him apart. He's honest. He guides aspiring entrepreneurs and he steers them away from potential pitfalls. And I'll tell you a quick story about that later on, about pitfalls, and really towards opportunities that are aligned with his clients' goals of franchise ownership. So, Greg, I'm really delighted to have you here with us today, sort of long overdue, actually. Before we get into the question, tell us a little bit more about you, because that was kind of a short intro there, and then tell us more about Franchise Maven.
Thank you for having me today, Gary. It's an honor. And a microelectronic circuit engineer is one who, all those little chips that run the vehicles, runs your phones and all that.
Yeah.
I worked in the manufacturing facility that made those, and I made certain that they were working correctly. So in a nutshell, that's what that is.
Yeah, that sort of stuff always intrigues me because, first of all, I don't understand it, but then also a lot of that's so miniature, it's miniaturized. And that to me is just amazing. I had the opportunity, I don't want to get off topic here, but I had the opportunity once to look at a chip under a microscope, and it looked like a road map. There's a million things going on that little teeny tiny chip. It's amazing.
That there is. So basically, a little bit about me is that I got my start back when I was 16. I worked for Taco Bell, and it just so happened I ended up working for a master franchisor for Taco Bell, and she owned about 50 Taco Bells throughout the Sacramento, California area. Didn't even know what franchising meant, didn't know what the word was. That's how I got into it. So fast forward, after 30 years in corporate, got out of that and didn't have the latest, greatest idea. So I thought, franchising, that was fun. Let's go back and do that again. Mm-hmm. So I went out there and went click happy on the internet, had 20 franchise development people calling me up saying theirs was the greatest franchise in the whole world since sliced bread. Finally got a franchise consultant who knew they existed. I did not at the time, but he guided me into a franchise. So I got into a franchise, ran that for a couple of years, but decided I really liked what that franchise consultant did, which was helping people realize their dreams of business ownerships. So that's where I got my start. I sold off my franchise itself, and just for the last 12 years, I've been doing franchise consulting where I get to know my people. Where have they been? What do they bring to the table? What's their skill set? What skill set do they enjoy using on a regular basis that matches with the franchise that I might pick out for them? Where are they at now? How much time do they have? How much money are they comfortable investing in a franchise? And then where do they want to go 5 to 10 years from now? And that's what I do.
Yeah, well, and that I know you make it sound simple, but that is a tall task because very often the folks who are dipping their toe or endeavoring to become a first-time business owner, they have a healthy fear, I'll put it that way. They really don't understand business per se, many of them, because maybe they've worked in corporate America. And the whole franchising thing is just a myth. The franchising thing is a myth to people. I'm actually surprised people in our business, sometimes they don't even really understand it. They claim to, but they don't really understand it. One of the things that was of interest to me when I read more about you and I know more about you is, and I failed to mention this, so maybe we'll talk about this just for a minute. You've written two books or three?
Excuse me. I have one book that I wrote all by myself,
Uh,
and that's the only Wall Street Journal best-selling book on franchising. And
wow.
then I have four books that I co-wrote, and another one of
Okay.
those made it to the Wall Street Journal
That's
best-selling list.
that's great. That's on my bucket list. You and I will talk about that afterwards, but it is on my bucket list. Okay, so let's kind of get into the question, and this is really more about for the franchisors that are listening. Um, you know, what, in your words, what do you believe the advantages are for a franchisor, a franchise company? What are the advantages for a franchisor to be working with a franchise consultant, helping them actually expand the brand? And maybe how does that work? Without giving away your secret sauce, maybe you can tell us about that. But maybe globally, what's sort of the overall advantages?
Well, basically, for the franchisors out there, what we as franchise consultants do is we do all the marketing and advertising. So you sit there and you basically, if you want, just wait for us to bring you candidates. So it seems pretty simple in a nutshell. But what you're doing is basically saving money on advertising costs. Then I get to know you. Who are you looking for as a franchisor
Hmm.
in a potential franchise candidate? So when those candidates and I do all the advertising marketing, not for specific franchises, but for franchising in general, then people come to me and I get to know them. Like I said before, let's sit down and see what your skill set is. Okay, once I know from the franchisor what skill sets are they looking for, what kind of backgrounds do they qualify monetarily, and do they qualify as a skill set as well? So I have an extensive questionnaire and then a whole list of other questions that I go through with my candidates. So when I come to you and I bring a candidate to you and say, Gary, Greg is interested in getting to know you, getting to know your franchise. Here's his qualifications. I give you the questionnaire. I give you the spreadsheet. I've already gone through a couple hours of talks with them. So you got a whole list of things already right there as a franchisor at your fingertips. So you know pretty much an extensive background of the
Hmm.
person that I'm handing off to you. And since you've already told me who you're looking for, this candidate on paper is a good fit for your franchise. Now it's just matching up
Right.
personalities, and just making sure you both like each other. An interview process from both ends, as you usually do when you go through your process with your
Right.
new candidates.
Okay, so it's important because kind of at the top of your explanation, you said when you're working with the franchisor, one of the questions or one of the goals is to find out who are you looking who are you looking for, meaning who does the franchisor believe is their person, their persona, their avatar. So a couple of things. First, how um, how important is that? I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. How important is the right person matched up with the right franchise company, that the franchisor isn't just bringing everybody in? And then what's the process? Like, is there a tipping point? How do you sort of narrow that down? Because that could start like over here with 100 different things, and then you narrow it down. So, love to get your take on why it's important um, that the franchisor bring in the right person. Oh, one other quick thing here. And does the franchisor, let's just do these two, okay? Why is it important? And does the franchisor really ever know who their perfect person is? Or do you have to kind of mold that a little bit for them?
Well, we could certainly take a look at the Founder movie, and we can see that Ray Kroc did not know who
All right, he thought
their
it was
person was.
rich buddies.
Yeah, rich buddies would do it, and they didn't work. That didn't work out too well. He figured out husband and wife teams work out great. So no, right at first, as an emerging franchise brand, you may not know exactly. It should be somebody fairly close to you to begin with on that, but you may have to develop that throughout your process at a later date. And that's important because when we look together, my candidates and myself, we look through your franchise disclosure documents. We're going to look at item number 20 as you grow and mature. And what we're going to be looking for there is your turnover rate on those, because that's right in there. It says, this is how many franchisees started the business and are still running it, and this is how many started and are no longer running it. And now if you see, a high turnover rate, I really like to see like 85 or 90% success rate. Now, there's many different reasons why they may have to leave. The family has to move out of the area, whatever. But you really want to know that you're picking out. That's what I tell people, is that when that turnover rate is low, that means that the franchisor really knows how to pick out the right franchise person. So a very important part of the process to go through that. And again, you may not know right away as an emerging brand who it is. It may take a little while to do it, but find somebody that you like.
Yep.
Just like yourself.
Yep. Well, the question also kind of bleeds into, and I'm not conflicted about it, but about what I'm about to say, but I know some people are. I know in the world of franchising, when we are marketing or doing whatever, we're talking about, be an entrepreneur or start your entrepreneurial journey. And there's even a magazine named Entrepreneur. In my world, as a former franchisee of Dunkin' Donuts, that's where I started. And as a franchisor, for me, maybe in many cases, the least favorite potential franchisee is an entrepreneur. My favorite franchisee is a former military person. And why do I say that? Entrepreneurs create. They tinker, they take things apart, they put it back together, they see if they got any pieces left over, they reinvent the wheel over and over and over again. People that have maybe a military or a disciplined background follow a system, they understand the mission, and they work as a unit. So I find that people who are entrepreneurs don't make good franchisees, and yet in the industry, when we look at our advertising themes, it's all about be an entrepreneur. Can you unravel that for me and tell me how you feel about entrepreneurs versus people who know how to follow a system?
Yeah, sure can, Gary. When people come to me and they say, how do I know or how can you tell that I'm going to be a good franchisee or I'm fit for franchisee? If they're a young entrepreneur, I say you're not a good fit, because as a young entrepreneur, you are ready to do the things that you want to do and create things that you want to create. So go out there and do it yourself and experience that yourself first on that. Actually, I've had some older entrepreneurs that, 55, 60 years old. They've come to me and they've had five or six different businesses they bought and sold. And they said, I'm looking for a franchise, Greg. And I'm like, dude, you're an entrepreneur. You've already done it before. You've already created it. Why do you need me? He goes, because I know what it takes to build something up. And I don't want to have to go through that process again. I want to step into something that is a business in a box that's already got the process and systems in place, so that I can just walk right into it, hit the ground running, and get that business going. And I don't have to reinvent those things myself. Yep. So no, a true entrepreneur is not going to do it. Those people that come from corporate that have already run a business within a business, they're good folks to do it because they've already know how to do it. But I just have to remind them that if you want the qualities of a good franchisee are, one, you got to be mentored, be able to be mentored. You got to follow a system and be able to follow a system and processes on that. And you've got to have some risk tolerance because it is a business. It is risky.
Yeah, without a doubt. Two quick things. So I spoke to a group of franchisees last summer, a group that we started actually in about 800 units at this point. And part of what we were talking about was team building and, bringing people in. If you're a franchisee and bringing employees in, it's not that much different than if you're a franchisor and bringing franchisees in. And some of the things, there's this concept called the 7 C's. And I don't know what all 7 are, but the 3 that I always latch on to, and you just alluded to 2 of them, the right person has to be coachable. They have to be compliant. So they got to follow a system. They got to be able to be mentored. So they got to be coachable, compliant. And then the other one is they have to communicate. And I see sometimes franchisees and franchisors get into this thing. And usually the problem that they're faced is not really the problem. It's how they're addressing the problem. That's really the problem. So communication, compliance, and coachability. I agree, 100% with you on those things. And I find that the other thing I wanted to tell you is I ran into someone at the multi-unit franchise conference 5 years ago. Well, maybe it was before COVID, and the gentleman owned like 90 Panera Breads. And I was like, whoa. I was like, wow, that's really being entrepreneurial. And he said, no, he said, I'm really not an entrepreneur. I said, okay. I said, I'm just a really good technician and a manager. And I thought, oh, okay, because that's sort of like my mentor, Michael Gerber, who wrote the E-Myth Revisited, talks about the visionary, which is the entrepreneur, the technician, and the manager. And usually people don't have all three. So the entrepreneur has to have a good technician or a good manager. A good technician needs to work for somebody who's a good entrepreneur and kind of crazy ideas. In franchising, however, you've seen this is probably more than I have. You have to follow that system. You don't work the business, you work the system, and the system works the business. So it's interesting to me about your take on the whole entrepreneurial piece. What do you do? Like, if you have someone that is just too entrepreneurial, I'll use the term, do you like chase them away or maybe point them in a different direction and tell them, hey, it's not about this franchise not being for you. I don't think there's any franchise that's for you.
I would tell them that any franchise that has any large number of franchisees is not going to be for them. But if they really, truly, honestly, really want to try a franchise, then I would tell them to try an emerging brand
Hmm.
franchise where they can help develop that brand. That
Yeah.
would be the only option, really, if they've got a lot of ideas. I've even had, I had a vice president once that got into a tutoring franchise, and she had her own ideas and she wanted to try them. Franchise let her do it. She failed. She switched to their model. But for the young ones, I would put them into probably more of an emerging. If they're insistent on going through the process, I would say, well, let's look at emerging brands and see if we can find you one that is looking for your skill set and then you get with them and see if they're willing to work with you to help elevate that brand and build that brand up. About the only option.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And again, looking at our sort of main question here, the advantages to a franchisor, from a franchisor's point of view, you're, lead generation aside, I get that, but you're actually doing the initial vetting because as we know, you're going to get a ton of people that are going to show up, but not all of them are going to be qualified philosophically, financially, or from an experience point of view. So, from a franchisor's point of view, you're taking a boatload of work off their plate. But there are other things there that I think are important. You mentioned, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about the process. You mentioned that you have a very thorough form and a sort of a checklist that you fill out. What does that process look like? Because if I showed up, if I sent you an email and we got on the phone and I said, well, I'm thinking about buying a franchise. I don't really know what I want to do. I don't know, I did marketing in a company, in a big Fortune 500 company. Where do you start with that? Because I haven't given you much to work with. So a friend of mine once said it's like you show up with a windshield wiper and you ask someone to fix the car. So tell me, like, where do you start? How do you start to unscramble that?
Actually, fairly easy, Gary. After doing it for 12 years, I kind of got it down.
Okay.
First phone call, very first phone call. I get on the phone. I say, sounds like you need some more information on franchising. So ask me anything you want about franchising. Ask me anything you want about me and tell me all about yourself. That's where it goes. And usually what ends up doing is they tell me all about themselves. And then I find out, what are your expectations for a franchise? So
Yeah.
we get that part out of the way right away if they have any unusual expectations for a franchise.
Yeah.
I just want to invest my money. I want to put in 5 hours a week. Show me the ones that make the most money where I can do that. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. It's going
Right.
to be work. You're going to have some work to do.
You got to
So
work.
really got some expectations to get out of the way. Make certain, and Gary, for the most part, people realize the fact that it's going to take some work. I rarely get people who just want to, do a completely passive investment.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
if they do, I stock market, buddy.
No, I'm with you. We do get that occasionally, like you. I mean, we get hundreds of inquiries every month, and sometimes we get. I don't know what they're thinking. Like, I just want to invest money. Well, go invest in the stock market. I don't know what to tell you. This requires work. So, looking at it from looking at it from your point of view towards the franchisor, where do franchisors sort of fall off the tracks when they start or try to do this on their own? Where are they? What mistakes are they making that you're not in your particular profession? What have you seen?
You have to have the right people in place to do that. So you're still going to need people. You're going to still get organic leads where you're going to have somebody that's going to go through that process with them. So that's going to be, a couple more steps that you're going to have to assign your people to, is getting to know the folks that come in. You're going to kind of do it as a franchisor. Similar, you'll have a head start when you get my information on there, because you already know this person's a fairly decent fit for your franchise on that. But the mistakes I say that that I hear from some of my people, from some of the franchisors, is trying to sell the franchise too soon on that. Some of my people come to me and said, well, I was looking at such and such franchise, but it seemed like they were really trying to sell me on it to begin with. So I would say that's the number one thing, number one complaint that I get from some folks on that. And I don't try and sell franchising right away. I'd say this is all about education. Probably more people come to me, or more people do not invest in a franchise than do invest in a franchise after they go through my process, after I go through the process together. So don't try and sell the franchise too soon. It's an interview process.
Yeah,
Both
I agree. I think that whole selling thing, and it's funny, the people I hear screaming about in our industry, screaming about how they, practice responsible franchising, are the people who are more often than not just selling franchises. And I'm of the belief that virtually anyone can be taught to sell a franchise, but to work with the franchisor and show them how to embrace the franchisee so that they set them up for success and they become successful. Because you and I both know that if you have a community of successful franchisees, that helps us do our job, because they're validating. And that all comes down to unit economics, communication, and that sort of stuff. Very often, I find that the fly in the ointment, although franchisors will disagree with what I'm about to say, the fly in the ointment is not the franchisee, it's the franchisor. Um, do you find, the franchisors are technically your client, okay? So your fiduciaries
Yes.
for the franchisor, yeah. So do you find ever that they kind of get to a point where you maybe drop them and you're not going to work with them anymore? Maybe they're just not listening, or when I say not listening, I mean you're making recommendations to help them, but they have a better way, even though they don't know anything about it, they have a better way. Have you ever dropped a client because they're off the tracks?
Very rarely over the 12 years that I've been doing this that I've had to do that. I generally, if I find that, again, going back to the sales thing, if I find if they're a little too pushy and a little too salesy on there, and this is what I hear from my people that I work with,
Yeah.
my, my potential franchisees, if they push too hard, and I hear that from them, then I generally don't want to use people that really push too hard and sell too much. But fortunately, with all the franchises I work with, it's very rare that I've ever had that
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, there are always those that are out there selling and kind of, I don't know, beating people over the head to get them to sign a franchise agreement. We have a policy in our company that if the franchisor does not absolutely require that the incoming franchisee have their franchise agreement reviewed by a franchise attorney, then they cannot be our client. Because we think that every franchisee coming in should have the franchise agreement reviewed by an attorney and get legal counsel. So I'd like your thoughts on that, because sometimes the buyer, not my client, but the buyer, the person I'm working with and educating, they don't want to use an attorney. And I'm like, are you crazy? So we sort of back end it by telling them, well, you can't become a franchisee because the franchisor has a policy that unless your franchise agreement is reviewed by a franchise attorney, you can't join us. So just your thoughts on franchise attorneys and documents and people really understanding what they're getting involved in after you've explained it.
I have 3 franchise attorneys that I automatically send that out an email to each one of my clients saying that I highly recommend that everybody have their agreement reviewed by a franchise attorney for a couple of reasons. One, they're going to let you know what you're getting yourself into and making certain that you're okay with it. And actually, even a little bit more importantly, is that if there's something unusual in that franchise agreement and they've seen many of them, that needs to be changed or adjusted, they will let you know. And that does not happen very often either, but it did happen many, many years ago at one point in time where they saw something that was unusual. We let the franchisor know that it was unusual, and the franchisor changed it in their agreement. And there's not much that can be changed in a franchise agreement because, they want everybody on the same playing board. It's not like going in and getting a job where you can negotiate everything. You can't. But there are a few things where the franchise attorney will say, we can negotiate these to your benefit. So it's just hugely beneficial to everybody to make certain that they get a franchise attorney to go through their documents.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And again, it just boggles my mind that people are ready to invest. We do a lot of restaurants, so our investment ranges are 5, 6, 800,000, $1 million. It just boggles my mind that someone's willing to do that without having counsel. Kind of on a last word here, okay? Because we're kind of running out of time, but I would love to get your thoughts on, if you had to give one piece of advice, or maybe 2 or 3, because you'll have to pick, but if you had to give sort of the top things that a franchisor can benefit from in using a company like yours, and in particular you, what would you say those top 1 or 2 things are, the advantages there, to get back to our original question?
Well, one of the great things about it, Gary, is that the back and forth that I have with my franchisors, I don't just, throw candidates at them and see if they stick. First off, like we've already gone through the whole vetting process, we do that. But now I don't get involved in the conversations between my clients and the franchisors. They do that separately. And then my clients, my potential franchisees, and myself, we talk later. So now I can get back with the franchisors and we can go back and forth and say, how's it looking? What are they thinking about on there? So it's really good communication, as you indicated before. Lots of communication is great. And that's really important because you don't always, as a franchisor, if you're just talking to that potential franchisee, you don't know behind the scenes what they're thinking about, whereas that's where I come in, so I can give you some insight on what they're thinking.
Yeah, I would, in my mind, what I'm thinking based on what you said, because I think it's brilliant. You're an educator, you're a facilitator, and you're a moderator. You're kind of doing all of that to kind of keep everybody communicating clearly and concisely in the process. Yeah, that's fantastic. Greg, if somebody wanted to reach you, maybe they want to buy a franchise or they're a franchisor who wants to use your services, what's sort of the best way to get in touch with you? Is there a website, an email? What's the best way?
Website is franchisemaven.com. That's franchise, M-A-V as in Victor, E-N.com. Greg at franchisemaven.com. Or as Gary and I were talking earlier, I'm kind of old fashioned. Pick up the phone and give me a call. 361-772-6401. I don't have an answering service. It's just me.
You're going to pick up the phone. Well, I can tell you the phone number and the websites that and the email that will be embedded in the bio when this will run, on the various social platforms. We'll put that in there. So anybody that's listening, don't be running around the house trying to find a pencil. Okay. It'll all be in there. Well, I mean, really, I could talk about this stuff with you for hours, but like I said, it's mastermind minutes, so we don't want to do that. But really, thank you so much for being with us today. It's really enlightening in terms of how franchisors benefit from working with seasoned franchise executives like yourself. I use this analogy. Hey, you might be good at making a pizza if you're the founder of a pizza franchise, but you're probably not so good at building a pizza franchise. And that's a whole different thing. So working with someone like yourself is truly beneficial. We got to have you back on, but for now, thank you so much for being with us today.
Been a privilege, Gary. Thank you very much, and an honor.
All right.